Jungkook sacrificed his solo parts for Jimin on stage. Their gazes made the whole stadium tremble, fire, eyes revolving hearts. A stadium-shaking night where Jungkook gives up his solo for Jimin, igniting sacrifice, secrets, and a bond that trembles under the lights. The first thing Jungkook heard was his own name cut from the track. "Go now," he said into the mic, breathless, as the cue he was supposed to take dissolved into silence, and the crowd inhaled like a single living thing. The stadium lights surged white, then blood-red, and the opening beat slammed into the night. Jungkook stepped back, one foot crossing behind the other as if he'd tripped, except he hadn't. He was giving space. On the giant screen, Jimin turned, eyes widening for a fraction of a second that felt like an hour. Jungkook nodded once. The kind of nod that wasn't a suggestion but a vow. Jimin took the line. It hit like lightning. His voice climbed where Jungkook's solo should have been, clean and dangerous, a blade wrapped in velvet. The audience roared, a wave of sound so dense it rattled the metal beneath the stage. Jungkook stood in the shadow of the light cone, chest burning, pulse loud in his ears, counting the beats he was choosing not to own. He had practiced this decision for weeks without admitting it to himself. He had rehearsed it in the quiet of dressing rooms, in the mirror fogged by showers, in the way his hands shook when he laced his boots too tight. Sacrifice had a taste. Tonight it tasted like iron and rain. Jimin moved like the stage belonged to him, like it always had, but something in his gaze kept snapping back to Jungkook, searching. When their eyes locked, the noise fell away. There was the smell of pyrotechnics and warm plastic, the heat of lights against skin, the low hum of bass vibrating through bone. There was also the memory of a hospital corridor 3 nights earlier, the antiseptic sting, Jimin's laugh pitched too high as he said he was fine. Jungkook had known he was. The choreography rolled forward, relentless. Jungkook hit every mark that wasn't a solo, body-precise, face calm, a professional mask stretched thin. He watched Jimin breathe between phrases, the slight hitch he hid, the way he grounded himself by tapping his thumb against his index finger, a habit Jungkook knew like his own heartbeat. The camera found them together, then cut away too late, catching the unguarded thing in their eyes. The stadium trembled again. Backstage, weeks of pressure had stacked like dominoes. The tour had been pushed harder than planned. Rumors had buzzed like flies. There had been arguments in hushed corners and apologies whispered into towels. Jungkook's fear had grown quietly, the most dangerous kind, until it taught him to make choices without asking permission. When the bridge came, the moment that would have crowned his solo, Jungkook stepped aside again. The band didn't miss a beat. Jimin did, just barely. He recovered, voice ringing, but Jungkook saw the tremor ripple through him. He mouthed, "Are you sure?" Jungkook smiled with his eyes and sang harmony instead, wrapping the melody around Jimin's lead like armor. The crowd screamed as if they understood everything. Maybe they did. By the final chorus, sweat slicked Jungkook's neck, the taste of salt on his lips. His muscles ached with the discipline of restraint. He felt light, emptied out, and somehow fuller than he'd been in months. When the song ended, the applause rose in a living wall, and Jimin turned to him, breathless, laughing in disbelief. They bowed together, foreheads nearly touching, sharing oxygen and a truth that didn't need words. After the lights dimmed and the encore chants thundered, they stood in the wing, hands on knees, catching breath. Jimin reached out, fingers brushing Jungkook's wrist, a question and a thank you braided together. "You didn't have to," Jimin said softly, the roar muffled by curtains and distance. "I wanted to," Jungkook answered, and meant every version of the sentence. He felt the old fear loosen its grip. Not vanish, nothing ever vanished, but ease enough to breathe. The rest of the night unfolded with a new gravity. Jungkook sang when it mattered and stepped back when it mattered more. Jimin leaned into the support without breaking. They moved as if guided by an invisible current, trust humming between them. The stadium became a vessel for something fragile and ferocious, a shared pulse that lifted everyone inside it. When the final bow came and the lights rose, Jungkook caught Jimin's gaze one last time across the stage. No cameras then, no choreography, just the quiet after a storm. The tremble faded, leaving warmth in its wake, and Jungkook knew the sacrifice had done what it was meant to do. not to erase himself, but to hold someone he loved steady in the brightest, loudest place on earth. The dressing room door slammed hard enough to make the mirrors shiver. "What were you thinking?" Jimin's voice cut through the steam and sweat, sharp, raw, nothing like the smooth tone he wore on stage. He paced once, then turned, eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea what you did out there?" Jungkook didn't sit. He stayed standing, back against the metal lockers, hands still shaking as he peeled the tape from his fingers. The sting grounded him. "I know exactly what I did." "You erased yourself." Jimin stepped closer, close enough that Jungkook could smell his cologne mixed with adrenaline. "You stole your own moment in front of 70,000 people." Jungkook laughed once, breathless, almost hysterical. "No, I kept you standing." Silence crashed between them, heavier than the bass that still throbbed through the stadium walls. Jimin's jaw tightened. He looked away, dragging a hand through damp hair, then turned back suddenly, eyes glossy with something dangerously close to breaking. "I didn't ask you to save me," he said. "I'm not weak." "I know," Jungkook shot back, heat rising. "That's the problem, you never ask. You carry everything until it crushes you, and you smile while it happens." Jimin flinched, the words landing too accurately to dodge. "You think I don't see you doing the same thing?" he snapped. "You think sacrificing yourself makes you brave." Jungkook pushed off the locker, closing the distance. Their chests almost touched now, breaths colliding. "I think loving someone means choosing them when it matters." The room felt too small, oxygen thinning. Somewhere down the hall, staff laughed, oblivious. Jimin stared at Jungkook as if seeing him for the first time, really seeing him, not the golden image projected onto screens. "You scared me," Jimin said, voice dropping. "When you stepped back like that, for a second I thought something was wrong, that you were hurt." "I was," Jungkook replied quietly, "just not the way you think." The confession hung in the air. Jungkook's chest tightened as memories rushed in, the hospital corridor, the way Jimin had hidden the pain, the doctor's warning whispered like a secret meant to be forgotten. Jungkook's fear surged again, hot and protective. "Why didn't you tell me how bad it was?" he demanded. Jimin's shoulders sagged. The fire drained out of him, leaving exhaustion behind. "Because if I did, you would have done exactly what you did tonight, and I couldn't stand the idea of being the reason you disappear." Jungkook reached out without thinking, fingers curling into the fabric of Jimin's sleeve. The touch was electric, grounding. "I didn't disappear," he said. "I chose." Jimin swallowed hard. His voice trembled despite himself. "Do you know what people are going to say? That you're fatting, that I'm taking from you, that this," he gestured between them, "isn't equal." "Let them talk," Jungkook said, fierce. "They don't hear what I hear when you breathe between notes. They don't see the way your hands shake when the pain spikes. I do." Jimin's breath hitched. For a moment, he looked like he might cry, and that terrified Jungkook more than any rumor ever could. Then Jimin laughed softly, bitter and fond all at once. "You're unbelievable," Jimin murmured. "You make everything feel dangerous." Jungkook smiled, tired but certain. "You make everything worth it." They stood there, inches apart, emotions raw, the weight of the night pressing in. Outside, the chants began again, calling their names in unison. The world wanted them back, wanted perfection, wanted fire. Jimin finally pulled away, wiping his face, squaring his shoulders. "Next time," he said, voice steadying, "we decide together." Jungkook nodded. Together. When they walked back toward the stage, side by side, something fundamental had shifted. The sacrifice was no longer silent. It had been seen, challenged, and answered, not with distance, but with trust. And as the lights flared again and the crowd erupted, both of them stepped forward, no longer alone, carrying the weight as one. The music hadn't even faded from their ears when the first crack appeared. It came as a vibration in Jungkook's pocket while he was toweling sweat from his neck, laughter still echoing down the corridor. One message turned into five into dozens. Screens lit up everywhere, staff phones, managers whispering urgently, a stylist swearing under her breath. Jimin saw it in Jungkook's face before he said anything. "What is it?" he asked, already bracing himself. Jungkook exhaled slowly. They noticed. Noticed what? Jimin snapped, though he already knew. That I didn't sing my solo, that you took it. Jungkook lifted his phone, jaw tightening. They're calling it a statement, a scandal. Some are saying I'm being sidelined. Others, he hesitated, others are saying you forced it. Jimin's smile vanished. What? Jungkook stepped closer, voice low. They're tearing you apart. Anger flared hot and immediate. Jimin grabbed the phone, scrolling with a sharp flick of his thumb, eyes darkening with every line. This is ridiculous, he said, then laughed harshly. They think they know us because they watched 3 minutes on a screen. Jungkook watched the muscles in Jimin's jaw work, saw the familiar pattern of restraint setting in. Don't do that, he said softly. Do what? Pretend it doesn't hurt. Jimin froze. Slowly, he lowered the phone. You think I care what they say? I think you care more than you'll ever admit. The words landed like a challenge. Jimin stepped forward, voice rising. And what about you? You think this doesn't feed into the narrative they've been building about you? That you're disappearing? That you're losing your fire? Jungkook's eyes flashed. I know exactly what they say about me. I hear it every night when I can't sleep. The room went quiet. Even the staff hovering nearby seemed to fade, instinctively retreating from the intensity crackling between them. Jimin's voice dropped. Then why would you hand them more ammunition? Because for once, Jungkook said, chest tight, I wasn't performing for them. The confession hit harder than shouting ever could. Jimin's breath caught. Then who was it for? Jungkook didn't hesitate. You. The words settled heavy and undeniable. Jimin looked away, packing, hands shaking just enough to notice. You don't get to make yourself smaller for me, he said, voice breaking despite the effort to keep it firm. I refuse to be the reason you burn out. And I refuse, Jungkook shot back, stepping in front of him, to watch you destroy yourself just to prove you're strong. Their voices overlapped, emotions colliding. Old frustrations surfaced, unspoken resentments, sleepless nights, sacrifices neither had ever named out loud. The pressure of years cracked open in that narrow room. You don't trust me, Jimin said suddenly. Jungkook stared. That's not true. You didn't trust me to handle my own moment, Jimin continued, eyes blazing. You decided for both of us. Jungkook swallowed. I trusted you with my moment. The argument stalled, stunned by the reversal. Jimin's shoulders sagged, breath shuddering out of him. You're impossible, he whispered. And you're reckless, Jungkook replied, softer now. We're a terrible combination. Jimin laughed weakly, tears threatening. Then why does it feel like we're the only ones who make sense together? Jungkook reached out, hesitant this time, fingers brushing Jimin's knuckles. Because we see each other when no one else does. A knock broke the spell. A manager poked his head in, face tight. We need to talk about the press response, now. Jimin straightened immediately, mask snapping into place. Jungkook felt it like a loss, like watching a door close. But before Jimin stepped away, he leaned in, voice barely audible. Next time, Jimin said, fierce and intimate, don't sacrifice yourself in silence. If we fall together. Jungkook nodded, heart pounding. Deal. They walked into the chaos side by side, controversy buzzing like electricity around them. Cameras waited. Headlines were already being written. But beneath the noise, beneath the judgment and speculation, something unbreakable had taken shape. Not perfect, not safe, but honest. And for the first time that night, Jungkook wasn't afraid of what the world would say. The conference room lights were too bright, bleaching the color from everyone's faces. Jungkook sat at the end of the table, fingers interlaced so tightly his knuckles burned. Across from him, Jimin leaned back in his chair, posture relaxed in a way that fooled everyone except Jungkook. He could hear the rhythm of Jimin's breathing, slightly off, controlled. The manager cleared his throat. We need to address what happened on stage, publicly. Jimin's gaze flicked to Jungkook for half a second. Address what exactly? The deviation, the manager said carefully. The change in vocal distribution. Jungkook felt heat crawl up his spine. I chose that. Silence snapped tight. The manager frowned. You chose it without clearance. Yes, Jungkook replied, voice steady but loud in his own ears. Because it was necessary. Jimin turned sharply. Jungkook. No, Jungkook cut in, surprising even himself. I won't let this turn into speculation about him. If there's blame, it's mine. Jimin stared at him, shock and anger colliding. You don't get to martyr yourself again, he said, low and dangerous. Jungkook met his eyes. I'm not. The room felt suddenly too small. Staff exchanged glances, tension thick as smoke. What about the rumors? Another voice asked. They're saying this proves favoritism or conflict. Jimin laughed, sharp and humorless. Conflict. He leaned forward, palms flat on the table. You want honesty? Here it is. We didn't rehearse that change because we're human, because sometimes real life breaks through choreography. A stunned pause followed. Jungkook's heart slammed against his ribs. Jimin. I'm not finished, Jimin said, eyes never leaving the manager's. You can spin it however you want, but don't you dare frame him as weak or fatting, and don't you dare paint me as someone who takes what isn't given. The room held its breath. The manager sighed. You realize how risky this is. Jimin's voice softened, but it carried weight. What's risky is pretending we're machines. Jungkook felt something in his chest crack open. Gratitude, fear, love tangled too tightly to name. Later, alone in the hallway, Jungkook grabbed Jimin's wrist before he could walk away. Why did you say that? He asked. You didn't have to expose yourself like that. Jimin didn't pull free. I'm tired, he said quietly. Tired of hiding behind perfection, and tired of watching you bleed quietly for everyone else. Jungkook's throat tightened. I don't know how to do this any other way. Jimin stepped closer, voice trembling with restrained emotion. Then learn, with me, not for me. They stood there, the hum of the building vibrating through the floor, the smell of coffee and metal and exhaustion thick in the air. Jungkook reached up, brushing Jimin's thumb with his own, a grounding touch. I was scared, Jungkook admitted, that if you fell, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. Jimin's eyes softened, shining. And I was scared that if you kept stepping back, one day I'd turn around and you wouldn't be there. The honesty hurt in the best possible way. Jungkook let out a shaky laugh. We're a mess. Yes, Jimin agreed, smiling through it, but we're an honest one. That night when they returned to the empty stage for rehearsal pickups, the stadium silent and vast, they stood center stage together. No cameras, no crowd, just the echo of their footsteps and the memory of 70,000 voices. Jungkook sang his line. Jimin didn't take it. Instead, he harmonized. Their voices met in the middle, equal and unguarded, filling the hollow space with something warmer than perfection. And for the first time since the tour began, neither of them felt like they were disappearing. They felt seen. The call came at 2:17 a.m., slicing through the fragile quiet of Jungkook's hotel room. He answered without looking at the screen. Yeah. We have a problem, the manager said, voice tight, stripped of politeness. A big one. Jungkook sat up, heart already racing. What kind of problem? Someone leaked rehearsal audio. The words slammed into him. Jungkook's gaze drifted to the dark window, city lights blurred by rain. What audio? A pause, then carefully, the empty stadium, your voices, the harmony. Jungkook closed his eyes. In the next room, a door opened. Bare footsteps crossed carpet. Jimin appeared, hair damp from a shower, eyes alert the second he saw Jungkook's expression. What is it? Jimin mouthed. Jungkook held up a finger. Who leaked it? He asked into the phone. We don't know yet, the manager replied. But it's spreading fast. Fans are dissecting it. Some say it's proof you're rewriting the dynamic. Others are saying, he hesitated, it sounds too intimate. Jimin's face drained of color. How intimate? Jungkook asked quietly. People are calling it a confession, the manager said. They're asking why you sound like that when there's no audience. Jungkook hung up without another word. The silence between them was deafening. Jimin laughed first, short and incredulous. "A confession," he said. "They heard two people breathing and decided it was a scandal." Jungkook didn't laugh. They always decide. Jimin's smile faltered. This could get ugly. "It already is," Jungkook replied. He stood, packing, hands threading through his hair. "They'll say we crossed a line, that it wasn't professional." Jimin watched him, something dark and protective sparking in his eyes. "Did we?" Jungkook stopped. The question hit harder than any headline. "No," he said slowly, "but it was real." Jimin stepped closer. "That's what scares them." A notification buzzed, then another. Jungkook's phone lit up with messages, clips, comments moving faster than he could read. He turned the screen away. "I'm not letting them turn this into something toxic," Jimin said suddenly. "I won't let them use you." Jungkook met his gaze. "And I won't let them erase what it meant." The tension snapped. "You think meaning is enough," Jimin snapped back. "We live in a world that punishes meaning." "And I'm tired of living like meaning is a liability," Jungkook shot back. "I'm tired of pretending my voice doesn't shake when I care." Jimin's breath hitched. "You don't understand," he said, voice rising. "If they decide this is too much, they won't just come for you, they'll come for everything." "Then let them," Jungkook said fiercely. "I'm done shrinking." The words echoed, heavy and dangerous. Jimin stared at him, fear and admiration colliding. "You're asking me to jump without a net." Jungkook stepped closer, voice low, unwavering. "I'm asking you to jump with me." For a long moment, Jimin said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged, exhaustion spilling through the cracks. "I spent years learning how to survive by being careful," he whispered. "And you're standing here asking me to be brave." Jungkook reached out, cupping Jimin's wrist, grounding him. "You already are." Jimin's eyes burned. "If this explodes, there's no going back." "I know. And if they make us choose." Jungkook didn't hesitate. "I already did." The honesty was terrifying. It stripped away every safety net, every unspoken rule. Jimin's breath trembled as he leaned in, foreheads almost touching. "You're reckless," Jimin murmured. Jungkook smiled softly. "Only when it matters." Morning came too quickly. By sunrise, the leak had become a headline. Analysts argued. Fans divided. Support clashed with outrage. The world demanded an explanation. They stood side by side in the hallway outside another meeting room, shoulders nearly brushing. Jimin glanced at Jungkook, voice barely audible. "Whatever happens in there." "We face it together," Jungkook finished. Jimin nodded once, a silent promise. As the door opened and the noise rushed in, Jungkook felt the tremor again, not of fear, but of something irreversible. Whatever line they had crossed, it wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about truth. The meeting room buzzed before anyone spoke. Screens glowed along the walls, frozen on waveforms and paused clips, their voices caught mid-breath like evidence. Jungkook felt exposed in a way stage lights had never managed. Jimin sat beside him, close enough that their knees almost touched, close enough to feel the tension vibrating off his body. "This is where we are," the executive said, hands folded, tone neutral but sharp underneath. The leak reframed the entire narrative. Jimin leaned forward. "You mean it revealed it?" A murmur rippled around the table. "Careful," someone warned. Jungkook didn't wait. "No," he said, voice steady, surprising even himself. "Let him speak." Jimin shot him a look, half gratitude, half frustration, then continued. "People heard honesty. They're reacting to that because they're not used to it." "And honesty," another executive replied coolly, "can be interpreted as intimacy. That's the controversy." Jungkook's chest tightened. "Is intimacy a crime now?" The room went still. The executive sighed. "It's a risk." "Everything we do is a risk," Jimin shot back. "Performing injured is a risk. Pretending nothing is wrong is a risk. Why is this the line?" No one answered immediately. Jungkook could hear his own pulse, loud and insistent. You're asking us to deny what people heard, Jungkook said finally. To say it meant nothing. We're asking you to control the message, the executive corrected. Say it was a technical rehearsal, professional, nothing more. Jimin laughed softly, disbelief edged with pain. Nothing more, he repeated. Do you hear yourselves? Jungkook turned to Jimin, voice low but intense. If we say that, they'll believe we were lying last night. And if we don't, Jimin replied, eyes burning, they'll say we're confirming it. The trap snapped shut around them. Jungkook stood suddenly, chair scraping back. I won't apologize for how I sing. Gasps fluttered around the room. You don't have to apologize, the executive said quickly. Just clarify. Jungkook shook his head. Clarifying means erasing. Jimin looked up at him, something fierce and proud cutting through the fear. Sit, he murmured. Let me try something. Jungkook hesitated, then sat. Jimin folded his hands on the table. You want a statement? He asked calmly. Here it is. We respect our audience enough to believe they can feel the difference between performance and connection. Last night they heard connection. That's not scandal. That's music. Silence followed, thick and dangerous. That's not approved language, someone said. Jimin smiled, tired and unyielding. It's the truth. The meeting dissolved into argument after that, voices overlapping. Risk assessments thrown like weapons, warnings dressed as concern. Jungkook barely heard them. He watched Jimin instead, watched the way he held his ground without raising his voice, watched the exhaustion etched beneath the defiance. When it finally ended, no clear victory claimed, they walked out together into the hallway's dim light. Jimin exhaled shakily. That was worse than I expected. Jungkook let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. You were incredible. Jimin snorted. I'm pretty sure I just shaved years off my career. Jungkook stopped walking. Don't joke about that. Jimin turned, eyes searching his face. You're scared. Yes, Jungkook said, because if they come for you. They'll come for you too, Jimin interrupted gently. That's the point. The honesty disarmed him. Jungkook stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do you regret it? Jimin didn't answer right away. He looked down the empty corridor, then back. No, he said quietly. I regret all the times I stayed silent. The words settled deep. That night, alone in the practice room, they stood facing each other under dim lights. No cameras, no managers, just the echo of the day still clinging to them. Sing with me, Jimin said suddenly. Jungkook hesitated. After everything. Especially after everything. They sang softly at first, voices cautious, then stronger, letting the tension bleed into sound. When they finished, the room felt lighter, like a wound finally allowed to breathe. Jimin smiled faintly. No matter what they decide tomorrow. Jungkook met his gaze, heart steady despite the chaos waiting outside. This, he said, gesturing between them, was never the mistake. And in that quiet space, with controversy roaring just beyond the walls, they chose each other again, not loudly, not for anyone else, but with a certainty that no headline could undo. The decision came quietly. No emergency meeting, no dramatic announcement, just a message delivered in the early afternoon, polite and carefully worded, as if tone could soften impact. The company would not deny the leak, but it would not dramatize it either. There would be no apology, no correction, no explanation beyond a single sentence about artistry, trust, and respect for the audience. When Jungkook read it, he felt something loosen in his chest. Jimin sat on the floor beside the window, knees pulled in, sunlight catching in his hair. So, he said softly, they didn't silence us. They didn't bless us either, Jungkook replied. Jimin smiled faintly. I can live in that space. Jungkook crossed the room and sat beside him. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of how close everything had come to breaking. Are you okay? He asked. Jimin thought for a moment. I'm tired, he admitted, and scared, but I feel clean, like I finally said something I've been swallowing for years. Jungkook nodded. Me too. The next concert felt different from the moment they stepped on stage. Not louder, not bigger, just sharper, more present. When the lights rose and the crowd roared, Jungkook didn't feel the old pressure to prove himself. He felt anchored. When the song came, the one that had started everything, there was no hesitation. Jungkook took his solo. Jimin didn't step back. He stayed, harmonizing, standing shoulder to shoulder. Two voices distinct, neither overshadowing the other. The stadium trembled again, but this time it wasn't shock. It was recognition. Afterward, in the quiet of the empty stage, Jungkook sat with his legs dangling over the edge, staring out at the seats. "Do you think they'll ever stop watching us like we're a puzzle to solve?" he asked. Jimin joined him, bumping his shoulder lightly. "No," he said, "but maybe we can stop performing answers for them." Jungkook laughed softly. "That sounds dangerous." Jimin's gaze was steady. "It is, but it's also honest." They sat there until the lights dimmed completely, until the stadium returned to silence. There was no grand declaration, no promise about the future, just a shared understanding forged through fear, conflict, and choice. Jungkook had learned that sacrifice didn't always mean stepping back. Sometimes it meant standing firm and letting yourself be seen. Jimin had learned that strength didn't disappear when you leaned on someone else. Sometimes it multiplied. And whatever the world decided to believe about that night, about their voices, about the way they looked at each other on stage, one truth remained untouched. They had chosen each other, not as an escape, not as a spectacle, but as equals. And that choice, quiet and unyielding, was enough.